The warm weather and tropical beaches of Jeju Island, just off Korea's southwest coast, is a popular vacation destination for many living in Korea. After falling in love with the island, third-generation Korean-American Brenda Paik Sunoo decided she would no longer be just a visitor. She and her husband have now settled there permanently in a traditional fishing village, and Brenda has documented that journey in a book called Stone House on Jeju Island, Improvising Life Under a Healing Moon. Brenda was kind enough to stop by the studio and talk to us about her book and her life in Jeju. Welcome to the show, Brenda.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, can you briefly introduce yourself first and let us know who you are and what you did before you moved to Jeju?
I'm a third-generation Korean-American, as you mentioned. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I've also lived in other cities like New Jersey and San Francisco. But I was pretty much born and raised in California and attended UCLA and also got my Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing at Antioch University. So by profession, I'm a photojournalist and a writer for many years. And now that I'm now in my 70s, my husband is also retired. We're not inactive, but just retired, not full-time, 9 to 5. We really wanted to see what it was like to live in Korea. We had previously lived in Hanoi for 7 years, so we got a taste of the expat life. But it's different to come back to your ancestral homeland, which is what we wanted to experience.
I can imagine. The question next becomes, why Jeju? When was the first time you went to Jeju, and where did this connection come from?
Oh, I first came to Jeju in the 80s, actually. I came here with my aunt and my cousin, and at that time, it was the first time to Korea. And we did go to the mainland, but when we came to Jeju, I was just so impressed by the haenyeo. But at that time, I was still younger and I hadn't found myself professionally. So it was just something that just remained as kind of an image, these old ladies in suits diving, but they were Korean. And so that made a big impression on me. And then years later, when I became a journalist, I wanted to come back and research more the haenyeo, and did so in 2007, 8, and 9. And that's when I really got taken by wanting to live here.
And you wrote a book about the haenyeo, which
Yes.
went towards helping it become a cultural heritage, I understand, from the UN.
Yes, that book was called Moon Tides, Jeju Island Grannies of the Sea. And I did that because it was clearly the dying last generation of haenyeo that was going to be. And since I was living in Hanoi at the time, I told my husband, I've got to do the story now because these women are, dying out. It's a dying profession. And I think it's important for people to know the history of these women. And when I came here, I just lived in over the course of 7 months, over 2007, 8, and 9, I stayed in 3 fishing villages and got to know the haenyeo and made friends with different people that helped me. And that resulted in the book Moon Tides.
So you visited Jeju as a tourist before, and then you visited Jeju for work, to research for your book. Then how did you make that jump from tourist and working to living in Jeju?
Well, I think when I was living in Vietnam, that was as an expat. And I was what was known as, I guess, the trailing spouse because my husband was working for the UN there, the International Labour Organization. But I knew that we were foreigners and we were there for a short time and it was defined by his contract. But coming to Jeju was by choice. And that was because after my research, I really had become so much more smitten by Jeju landscape, nature, and I had made more friends. And I connected in a different way because it was my ancestral homeland. My halmoni, my grandmother, lived with us growing up. So when I came to Jeju and I was also I was in my 60s, I was seeing the haenyeo and they were active and they're strong. They were like role models for me. And at that time, I had already become a journalist. So I wasn't putting them on a pedestal. I felt like they were peers. And I thought, this is a place that I feel comfortable where I think, we can live.
Okay, so deciding to live in Jeju and retiring is one thing, but then deciding to build your own house, and especially out of stone, that's again quite an ambitious leap, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like a leap, but actually I think there is kind of a continuum because over the course of my visits to Jeju, I was always looking at land. and actually when I first came to Jeju, there's a video that I took in the 80s, and I was looking at that a couple years ago, and on that video, I'm saying on camera to my aunt when she's telling me, oh, she'll see me again in San Francisco, California, and I'm saying, no, you're all going to come and see me on the land that I'm going to buy in Jeju. Now, this is in the 80s.
Right.
So in some ways, it was almost like a premonition or something that I said spontaneously, but I think something, it was like a muse. Jeju was calling to me, but waiting for me to come of age and do the book, and then after the book, have friends, and then finally settle. And in many cases, a lot of Korean Americans, I think, that come to Jeju, either from the mainland or the United States, usually it's the wife or the woman that comes first and then drags the husband.
Right.
But the husband comes, and then he also falls in love with Jeju. So that's how it was with us. As far as building a house, I think it became clear when we no longer had elder care responsibilities in the United States, that instead of going back and forth, maybe we can consider settling. And that's when we found this piece of land by the sea. And in the United States, we would never be able to afford land or a house by the sea. But in Jeju, it was possible, especially if you lower your expectations to something small.
But again, the title of your book is Stone House. I think that's very important, especially in your book. You talk about that,
Yeah.
That must have been a challenge, though, as well, to use these kind of the local materials and using traditional Korean house designs for your new house. Because I think most Koreans would just build build a modern kind of house.
Right. Actually, that is what's happening in Jeju, and that's, I think, the reason why I wanted to do something that suggested cultural preservation, because many of my friends are artists or preservationists of some sort, and I think Jeju is developing so rapidly. I mean, it's pretty hot place, and most of the buildings are concrete, glass, very minimalist, modern, and it starts to show some of the tastes of the younger mainlanders who are coming and upscaling the island, which is fine in a way. But on the other hand, my concern is about cultural preservation. And as an American, Korean American, who comes from California suburbs and all that, I don't need to come to Korea and build another Western house. For me, the whole experience is to immerse in the culture and village that I'm not familiar with. So I wanted that to fit in, but I also wanted, as an American, to make a statement, if I could, in building the house, that I really loved the charm and the tradition and the history of materials that have been used. So the Jeju doljeep, are very iconic. I mean, when you come in from the airplane and you see these orange and green and blue rooftops, and the Jeju house with the stone, they're very charming. They're simple. They're small, and those are the ones that are. All the villages are usually those. And I really hate to see those disappear. So, of course, I couldn't rebuild the same old ones. It's more modernized, but I have employed using the similar elements and made it more fusion, more my own Korean American fusion style. But pretty much still saying, let's respect the elements and use Jeju workers and let them help build the house with their own hands. And that was important to me.
The region that you located as well, this area called the Ewol village, is very small. It's on the northwest coast of the island. How did you end up deciding on that particular place?
Well, actually, I at first decided not to go there because it was very popular. It's been written about. Apparently, a few mainland celebrities had bought property there or something. So I thought, well, maybe it's too much over there. But unbeknownst to me, when my friend found an ad, which I asked her to look for in the ad, this little doljeep property came up. It was all dilapidated, but it was in a little cove in Ewol neighborhood, and it was on a little hill, and it was only a cluster of maybe 12 houses or so in our little, spot. And because these doljeep are very popular and they're being snapped up by younger mainlanders for pensions and cafes, I knew that it was hard to come by. So what we saw, as dilapidated as it was, I still fell in love with it and thought we were going to renovate it. Unbeknownst to me, it was so dilapidated, we'd have to demolish all of it except for the cow stall, which is the only part that we actually technically preserved, and the rest we had to build.
So you chronicled your journey of building this house. It took over a year, I understand.
Yes, it was supposed to be 5 months, but it took 18 months.
Yeah. And this book, why did you decide to write it, or your experiences into this book?
Well, I am a journalist, and I do love to write books. And I thought just the idea of a Korean American, third generation, coming back to Korea and Jeju, building a house, especially at our age. You know, my husband and I are in our 70s, and as one RJC asked in the course of the building, he says, "Why are you starting to build a house now at your age?" And so my answer to that was, "Why not?" You know, it's hopeful. I mean, it's not like I'm expecting to just fall over and die tomorrow. I mean, you never know. So you have to live each day with hope. We have energy. We're healthy. So far, knock on wood. So we wanted to build a house. It was a major creative endeavor for my husband and I to do it together. And it was joyful for him and probably more frustrating for me because I was the main one communicating to the contractor in my broken Korean and Kakao Talk. Papako, translator.
So when I look at the book and when I read it, there's a lot of emotion involved in there, I think. I mean, and not just the book as well, but also the house is not just a retirement home. It is very much a work of love, I think. And I love the subtitle as well. It says, so the title is Stone House on Jeju Island. The subtitle is Improvising a Life Under a Healing Moon. I think shows your poetic, free-hearted spirit, but also suggests some pain. And very early on in the book, you also talk about the death of your son, you know. Right. And that, I think, frames a lot of this kind of emotion and puts the reader where, you know, your mind is, I think. You know.
Right. I think anyone that's gone through a loss, if you come through it, I think doing anything creative is healing. Not that you always have to build a house, but the main thing is that you have to go step by step to heal. When my younger son passed away, that was 25 years ago. So building this house wasn't so much a healing project for that grief. But, you know, I am in my 70s, as I said, so there's many losses of friends. There's many loss of our age, our youth, very much loss of not being in the United States. So Jeju also has its own pain and suffering because of Sasam. You know, this week was the 71st anniversary of the April 3rd uprising and massacre. So people think of Jeju as beautiful, which it is, the landscape, the nature, but there's sorrow underneath that. And so it just represents and mirrors kind of my own emotional landscape of being joyful and blessed for being healthy here today, but also having gone through many of life's challenges and in our own case, our own, you know, personal tragedy. But Jeju people are resilient. They're strong and they're very feisty. Well, Koreans are feisty, but Jeju people are even feistier, I think, because they're so earthy. And I just feel very comfortable here.
Yeah, I think you're quite feisty as well. I'm talking to you now, you know, you have a bubbly energy, which are very infectious. But this is obviously Stone House on Jeju Island is one of several books you've written, and you've written over the past several years. What is your plan ahead now? You've built this house in Jeju. It's a retirement house, but I have a feeling that's not going to be it for you. There's more I feel you want to do.
There is. If my health, you know, holds up and all. Right now, I mean, in 11 years, I wrote 4 books. So a lot of that is very cerebral. It takes a lot of energy output, you know, to do things like that. So I find I shake up my brain by doing a lot of things like some printmaking and mixed media and art. So I'm really enjoying doing that and letting myself express myself in other ways. And then I hope one day to figure out how to maybe integrate the writing, photography, and art all in one kind of project. I do it in a little bit of ways in each of my books, but we'll see what I do. I think it's time for me just to kind of rest a bit and see what inspires me and just be open. I think the main thing is just be open. I didn't know 10 years ago that I was going to build a house.
Well, it's a wonderful and charming book, and it's we didn't mention the photography in there is beautiful as well.
Thank you.
Brenda Paik Sunoo, thank you for coming in today and introducing us to your wonderful work.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.